Before I get started on remarks and introducing our speakers and everything tonight, I've got a few thank yous to do. I'd like to start by thanking the Civitas Board of Directors, our chairman, Bob Luddy, who I'll be introducing in a moment, Jim Anthony, Garland Tucker, and a member who just left, who's not here, Howard Schultz, who just left our board. And I'd like to thank them for their support, guidance, and for their generous contributions. And their support helps make this possible, along with the support of a lot of people like you. And speaking of support, our sponsors, because without them, we couldn't put this event on. And they are very generous, and a number of them have been with us for several years. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Mark and Julie Canton, RAI, which is Reynolds Associated Industry, which is kind of ironic because Reynolds is about to be bought by a British company, British American Tobacco. So we kind of got a theme going here tonight. British speaker, British company buying our companies. Grassroots Leadership Academy, Bridge to Wellbeing, Colliers International, Captive Air, Coca-Cola Bottling Consolidated, Donors Trust, North State Journal, Duke Energy, the Heritage Foundation, the Charles Koch Institute, Jeff Start for State Senate, North Carolina Values Coalition, Jarrett Bay Boat Works, Ed Choice, Tiger Hive, Frontiers of Freedom, Aesthetic Images Photography. You'll probably see those people wandering around. They are a sponsor, but they're also doing our photography here. Judicial Watch, Convention Estates, the Jesse Helms Center Foundation, Grassroots North Carolina. I guess the storms are here now. American Future Foundation, John Locke Foundation, Fern Schubert, North Carolina Family Council, the Icon Lecture Series, and Hyatt Guns, we're giving away a gun this weekend donated by Hyatt Guns. If any of you aren't familiar with an AR-15, sort of. So they are our sponsors. They help to pay for this because the cost of putting this on is a lot more than your tickets cover, but we do this so that people can attend from all over. And we give people we give scholarships to people tomorrow and stuff to bring in because we want the grassroots from around North Carolina to be part of this. At this point, thank you. And I should say, this is the largest gathering of grassroots in North Carolina every year. So you should give yourselves a round of applause. In the past, I usually give a short recap of what Civitas has been doing, or we show a film, we kind of highlight. But this year, I'm going to do a little differently. I'm going to give you 3 phrases. And this will help explain Civitas and what we do. Removing barriers. There should be a slide up there. There you go. They changed my slide, but it's the fight to eliminate barriers to freedom so all North Carolinians can live a better life. The deep state and fake news. You're going, how do those interrelate? Like I said, that's our mission in Civitas. We fight to eliminate government barriers to help North Carolina citizens reach their full potential. And we do this by continuing to reduce taxes and regulations, our lawsuits that we have filed to hold North Carolina officials accountable, and we also have been working vigorously to expand school choice in our state. In fact, just recently, for the first time, the Senate budget out of this North Carolina Senate included education savings accounts for K through 12 education. Hopefully, they'll be in the final budget, but that was a first for North Carolina, and education savings account are a way of implementing school choice that is sweeping the nation, and it empowers families and individuals to craft an education that fits the child best. As always, we will continue to research, write, and advocate for conservative policies. But why did I say deep state? Because the deep state has been a topic of conversation at the national level now, especially with President Trump in and people saying that the deep state is fighting back and all this. And when you talk about the deep state, don't just think about the national government and what's going on there. because really the deep state exists anywhere there's government in the United States. And it's a really a function of the progressive era, which believed that government should be run by people who were trained experts, that it should not be run by politicians or by the people who elect them. So one of the things, as Civitas, we try to keep an eye on the bureaucracy. That's why we file lawsuits when they go rogue. It's why when they fight back against the wishes. Right here in North Carolina, we can see policies passed by the legislature that the bureaucracy does not implement correctly or that just chooses to ignore. That is a form of deep state. It is one of the reasons we need to elect politicians who are willing to cut bureaucrats, because guess what? When you have less bureaucrats, they're too busy doing their job to plot against the politicians who are making the laws. So we also have that at the local government. Don't just think that's a state and national thing. Anybody here who has dealt with inspections knows what I talk about when I say bureaucrats can be your biggest nightmare. If you have built a home or done any work and had to have an inspector from the city or county come out, sometimes that can be your worst nightmare. Fake news. Generally, when people think of fake news, they think about something that is blatantly wrong, that is made up. But that's not the real danger of fake news. Former U.S. Attorney General William French Smith was quoted as saying, "Everything you read in the newspapers is absolutely true, except for the rare story of which you happen to have firsthand knowledge." And that is, he called, Knowles' Law of Media Accuracy. And anybody who's been involved in public policy or in government or in politics has had that happen to them. They say, well, that story's wrong. If you have firsthand knowledge, you will find lots of things wrong in stories. Problem is, most people don't have firsthand knowledge of what's going on, so when they write something about a public policy debate or about a governmental action or about a politician saying something, they take it as true. But you need to be more skeptical, and that's what we try and do at Civitas. We try and hold state and local journalists to account when they lie about things or when they don't tell the truth, and it happens all the time. We tend to think of that as something to worry about with the national press and everything. No, it's true here locally, both at the local and at the state level. So that's one of the things we try and do. It's important to hold them to account for that. And Aaron Knoll, the guy who did that, he was the editor of the Progressive magazine, just by the way. He was a progressive, and he said that. So I'm not gonna go on anymore because we've got some better speakers than me who are gonna come up here. So to introduce our first speaker, I would like to call on Bob Luddy, the chairman of the Civitas Board of Directors. He is the founder and CEO of Captive Air, the nation's leading manufacturer of commercial ventilation systems, which turned 40 in October of 2016 and continues to win awards. Bob is an education entrepreneur supporting education reform and putting that into practice, having launched a charter school, very successful with a long waiting list, a parochial school, and a chain of nonprofit private schools, Thales Academy, which are in high demands wherever they locate. In his spare time, he is a student of Austrian economics and is happy to discuss Ludwig von Mises with you after dinner, right, Bob? So, Bob Luddy.
Thank you, Francis, and thanks for the excellent job you've done as the president of Civitas. We need to have a colonel fighting the bureaucrats, so we have the right guy, believe me. I wanted to take just a moment to thank our founding fathers who gave us this absolutely amazing country. And they essentially gave us they gave us freedom that essentially never exists in the world prior and rarely exists in the current world. And that's really the essence of America. So you think of what happened from that freedom. Americans became the most creative, the most innovative, the hardest working producers in the history of mankind because of that freedom. That's the central tenet of what the founders gave us. Now, if you look around the world, it's becoming a little bit more competitive for the first time in thousands of years. So innovation is going to be a requirement for all countries in the future. Complacency will not be an option. Economic growth is based on really two tenets in my mind, and the first is cooperation. And our founding fathers realized that, so they gave us a constitution, a law, and equal protection under the law that fostered cooperation. And if you think about it, in our civil society, we get along, we respect each other, we have disagreements, sometimes we have disputes, but basically we get along. And America is a very beautiful place to live in if we compare and contrast that with the political society. We all know how ugly it's gotten in recent years. The second tenet is essentially, Jean-Baptiste Say told us in 1803 that supply creates demand. And translated, that means if you innovate and you create great products, people will buy those products and the economy will grow. That's not what we hear from our government. We hear that if we have more government spending, we'll have better economic growth. Most of you know that's not true. So one of the things that Civitas does is try to drive that message home, that it's you individuals, the creativity of every American that makes our economy grow, not the government. But there's challenges to innovation and growth. Sometimes it can be a lack of vision. That's normally not a problem in America. Some complacency, documented in the recent book by Tyler Cowen on complacency. There's idea blockers, and there's bureaucrats, the deep state that Francis just talked about, which is creating severe problems and has knocked our growth rate down to 2%. If you took that away, our growth rate would easily be 4%, in spite of what economists tell us. If you think about the winners of the future, they're already here in the present. Amazon today bought Whole Foods. Why? Because the synergy between those two companies, combining skills, will create great opportunities for American, and there'll be spin-offs from that. So if you think of groceries today, the price of groceries continues to go down. It's probably one of the most competitive industries we have in America today. So how does this process continue? Through new knowledge, through alertness, through education, which is why I spend a lot of time on education. We'll never get there based on our current public school system. So cooperation, innovation, continued supply of great products, fierce competition, which we have in America, will make us, continue to make us the greatest country in the world for the next, for centuries to come. So I'll leave you with this thought: let's cooperate. Obviously, we have to have Civitas, and we have to have you individuals fighting the government, because they are the blockers of economic growth. But at the same think about the 19th century entrepreneurs when they didn't have to pay any taxes and they didn't have any government regulation. They produced so much wealth in so many industries that everybody got mad at them because they were too successful. So then they became the bad guys. But in reality, they set up the opportunity for us to live here in the 20th century. So I encourage every one of you to cooperate, to enjoy our civil society, and thank you for the support of Civitas and what it's doing to keep freedom in America.